Hi, Teri here from Stamping Magic. Welcome back to my channel. Today's project is a fancy fold card. I've used the Paradise Palms stamp set together with the coordinating palms dies, and I've created a Z fold card, albeit a backward Z. Now I'm going to show you a couple of techniques in this video. The first one is this splatter technique that I used on the front of the card. I'm also going to show you how to reduce the size of a die cut that's got a fancy edge. And I'm also going to show you how I created these little suns. Now this middle panel is where you would write your message. The card folds flat and it will fit in one of our standard size envelopes that we use here in the UK. But if you use 8.5 inch by 11 inch card, your standard size envelopes are going to be too small. So I would recommend that you create a box, and I'll leave a link to the top right of the screen to a video that shows you how to make one for this size. So let's get started. These are all the measurements you need for all the elements required to create this project. So if you're interested in reproducing it, take a screenshot so you can refer to it later. I'm using Starry Sky card for the front panel, and I'm going to protect my work surface for this technique. There are lots of different techniques that will create a splatter on your cardstock, but I'm going to use the Wink of Stella for mine. This is the clear Wink of Stella, and this one is a reactivated one. And what I mean by that is that I've used it and it's run completely dry, but then I've reactivated the inside so I can continue using it. Now to do that, you want to remove the top lid and then remove the glitter barrel that's underneath. I'm just using tweezers, but you know, whatever works. And it slides out quite easily. And then I'm going to fill the rest, or partly fill the rest of the barrel with isopropyl, which is a rubbing alcohol. I use 70%. Now you don't want to completely fill the barrel, because when you put the glitter tube back in, it will overflow. Now mine is still quite full, so I'm not adding any more. But you just want to reinsert the glitter barrel and push it down, and then screw back on the top of the pen. Now you can give it a shake, and then you can give it a squeeze, and you'll see the liquid run through to the front of the barrel. Okay. Now to make the splatter, all you need to do is bounce your pen on something hard. You can use your finger, but that gets quite painful at times. So I like to use a ruler. And you can see the splatter appear on your cardstock. It dries quite quickly, but it does take a minute or two, so you want to be careful you don't smudge it. And you don't need to use a reactivated one, you can just use a brand new one. It'll work just the same. And that's it. Very simple technique, but just beautiful. Very sparkly and shimmery. This is the Paradise Palms stamp set. Now today I'm going to use all of the images apart from this grass one. I'm using the happy birthday and the wishing you a warm and beachy kind of day sentiments. The front panel sentiment will be stamped on a scrap of basic black card, and I'm going to start by prepping the card with my embossing buddy. This will remove any static and stop the powder clinging where I don't want it to. Now I'll be stamping with Versamark, which is a sticky ink that will hold the embossing powder. So I'll just stamp it down, and then I can cover with the white embossing powder. I can then melt the powder with my heat tool. I'm going to die cut it using one of the deckled rectangles dies, and it's the smallest one. Now this die is longer than I need, so I'm going to make the die cut smaller. I'm positioning the die onto the sentiment, so the left hand side of it is how I want it to be. So I'm not worrying about the right hand side at the moment. Now I'm going to fix this into position just using a low tack tape, and then I'll run it through. I can now remove the sentiment from the die, and then I'm going to reposition the die so the right hand side is correct. Now with this die there's no sort of edge where the die will drop into. You've seen me do this before when I've used stitch dies, but this one hasn't got that, so all I'm going to do is flip it over and make sure the cardstock is within the cutting blade on the part that I've already cut, and then just secure it. This just makes sure that it's straight, and then I can run it through my die cutting machine. I can then remove the die from my sentiment, and you'll see that right hand edge has been cut. I'm now going to stamp the sentiment for the third panel. Now I'm going to stamp this onto a large piece of basic white card, and this will be die cut, and I'm going to use the deckled rectangle dies again, the 4th size down. I've used the 3rd size already to create a basic black mat that will go underneath it. So the cardstock I'm stamping on is larger than the die I'm using to die cut. Now it doesn't have to be this much larger, this is just the piece I had available today to use. I use this technique quite a lot when I'm stamping sentiments onto a die cut, because I can't be faffed to get my Stamparatus out basically. I'd use my Stamp-A-Majig, but as that's retired I don't really like to too much in videos. So anyway, I'm using Memento Tuxedo black ink, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment more or less where I want it within my die cut. There we go, and it's pretty straight and it's in quite a good position. But if it wasn't straight, or it wasn't in the position that I want it to be, because I haven't die cut it already, I can adjust the die before I position it and run it through. So I can have it tighter in that corner, I can correct any straightness issues by adjusting the position of the die. I can put the sentiment in the center or wherever I want it. It's easy to do at this stage. So you just want to position the die where you want it, so that sentiment is exactly how you want it to appear, and then secure with low tack tape and run it through your die cutting machine. I'll now finish the rest of the stamping for this panel. Now I'll be using several ink colours, so Saffron, Evening Evergreen, Soft Suede and Early Espresso. I'm going to stamp both the tree trunks first of all, and I'm using Soft Suede ink for both of them. Having the sentiment already stamped makes it easier to position these where they need to go. Now next I'm going to stamp the first of the palm tops, and I'm using Evening Evergreen ink. So I'm doing best guess for placement, and as you can see I've got a little gap, but that's fine because you've got a little coconut stamp that you can use to fill in. And I'm using Early Espresso ink for the coconuts. I'm going to stamp the sun next, so it's in position. And I'm inking up with So Saffron ink first of all, and then I'm going to use the Stampin' Right markers for the rest of it. I'm first going round the edge, just going in slightly with my pumpkin pie, and then I'm going to go right on the edge with the cherry cobbler. And I'm using the side of the markers for this. Then, because the So Saffron ink might have started to dry, I'm just going to huff or breathe on the stamp to reactivate the ink and then stamp it into position. I can then stamp the second palm top using Evening Evergreen ink. And this time the placement was pretty good, no gap, but I can still stamp those coconuts using Early Espresso at the top of the tree trunk. This basic white mat is for the middle panel, so this is where I'll write my message. Now on the card at the start of this video, I stamped this on the right hand side, but I think this time I'm going to stamp it on the left. I'll still need the So Saffron ink, but I also need to use some Sahara Sand ink as well. I'm going to start by stamping the ground, and I'm using Sahara Sand, and I want this towards the bottom left of my panel. So I stamped it once, but I can still see a little of the white card, so I'm going to stamp it again. I turned the stamp upside down to get some colour variation. This time I'm going to ink up the complete stamp using the Stampin' Right markers. I'm using Soft Suede for the trunks and Evening Evergreen for the palms. Again, make sure you use the side edge of the tip and not the tip itself to do this. If you use the tip, then you can mash them, which will ruin your pens. Once you've inked up the whole stamp, you want to breathe or huff on it again to reactivate any drying ink, and then stamp it down. The sun is created in exactly the same way as I showed you before. So first of all I ink up with So Saffron. Then I use the pumpkin pie marker to go round the edge, taking it just slightly in towards the centre. And then finally the cherry cobbler marker right on the edge. I'll then breathe on the stamp and stamp it down. I'm using basic black for my card base. Now this piece measures 12 inches by 6 inches, so it's half a sheet of 12 by 12. And we do currently sell 12 by 12 in basic black. I'll place it into my Simply scoreboard with the long side across the top and score down at 4 inches and 8 inches. The first score line will be a mountain fold and the second score line a valley fold. I have my card base. And then for the front of the card I have a basic white mat onto which I'm going to add the speckled Starry Sky mat. Then I've got a few die cuts in basic black, and I've die cut these using the coordinating palms dies. I cut the tree twice, and then I cut this piece, which is the grass, once. Then I've also got my sentiment, and I've added dimensionals onto the back. Then I have my stamped centre panel, and I'm going to layer this onto a mat of Starry Sky. And finally my third panel, I've got my stamped die cut piece which I'll layer onto the black, and then I've got some of the 2022-24 in colour in Starry Sky, which I'll layer onto a Starry Sky mat. And that's my card complete. Now, as I said at the start, it will fit into one of our standard size envelopes, but not if your standard card is 8.5 inch by 11. Your envelopes are smaller than ours. So there's a link at the top right to a video that shows you how to make a box for this size card. And here's another look at my original card. Very similar. Now, there was one thing I did on my original card that I wasn't happy with and was a bit of a mistake, was when I was adding the palm trees to the front, I used white dimensionals. I forgot completely about our black ones, which are the ones I used for this new card. So if you have black, make sure you use them. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Bye for now.